Hello MCC, Denise here. I'm glad that we have the technology so that I can kind of be with you tonight as we continue our series on wisdom. If you have spent at least some of your life in a church, you've probably met the Proverbs 31 woman. She often comes up in Mother's Day sermons. She's spoken about at women's conferences. The Proverbs 31 woman is understood as the ideal woman. This is who you should be like if you're a woman. The problem is she's some kind of superwoman. Not only does she run her household like clockwork so that nothing ever goes wrong, she's also this amazing businesswoman who invests wisely and brings home a truckload of money. She is an amazing seamstress. She makes her own clothes and those of her family out of fine linen. You know that I don't do that. She probably does cross-stitch. She doesn't fear famine or drought because she stored so much food and supplies away for the lean times in life. She gets up before dawn. She works late into the night. Her husband is in awe of her, and her children rise up and call her blessed. She's also generous to the poor, and she's got a wonderful reputation in her town. On top of all of this, she's nice. To be honest, I never really liked the Proverbs 31 woman. She's like this perfect woman that no one could ever live up to. It's like she's designed to make all women everywhere feel inadequate. You can't be friends with a woman like that. She's just too perfect. I used to say, I'd like to kick the Proverbs 31 woman right between verses 5 and 6. But having understood the book of Proverbs a little better more recently, I'm actually starting to warm to her. Now, some of what I have to say today I've gleaned from Old Testament scholar Pete Enns and his Bible for Normal People podcast on Proverbs. That podcast propelled me back into Proverbs to have a closer look for myself. And I've realised that the Proverbs 31 woman is a much more profound character than I realised. She is someone to look up to emulate, but not in the way that you might think. And I'm starting to think that maybe I could be friends with her after all. One of the keys of understanding Proverbs is to understand that it was originally written to men, young, adolescent, heterosexual men, bursting with testosterone, who were being trained for a life in the royal court. These were the men that the king would be relying on in the future to help him rule the nation. So the original intention of Proverbs was to instruct these young men in the ways of everyday wisdom so that the nation would be ruled wisely, so that the nation would enjoy stability and prosperity, and all the people in it would be treated justly and fairly. Such leaders would need to be able to handle money wisely, both their own and that which they handled on behalf of the king. They would need to be very careful in how they spoke, speaking honestly, but also with great discretion. They would need to be able to speak with anyone, from the poorest resident of the kingdom to important foreign ambassadors. They would need to be trusted, loyal to the king, resisting all temptations that might lead to disgrace or disloyalty. They would need to live lives of integrity, making sure that they never got involved in anything scandalous. Get the picture? So Proverbs is made up of a lot of wisdom sayings about finances, about controlling your speech and speaking well, about honesty and discretion, about being a person of integrity. But Proverbs also has these 4 women. And to really understand Proverbs, we'll have to put our own cultural sensitivities on hold for a while we hear about these women and not be offended by the way that wisdom and wisdom's opposite, folly, are portrayed in Proverbs. The writer of Proverbs, I wouldn't call him a feminist. The first woman we meet is Lady Wisdom. She's out in the streets calling to us, calling to those young teenage boys. She calls out in the middle of the hustle and bustle of everyday life. She's in the street, she's in the mall, she's at the train station, she's everywhere that life happens. She's calling to you. She's trying to get you to pay attention to her. A little later, we find her in her house, inviting us to come in and eat with her. She has bread and wine and a big juicy steak that will nourish you. She wants you to be her guest. We're told if you follow her, if you go in to be her guest and eat her food, she will exalt you. She will place a fair garland on your head. She will ensure that your life will be the best that it can be. She will guide you and direct you on your path through life. But then we meet another woman. It's the seductive wife of your neighbour. The neighbour who is away on business. This woman lies in wait for the young men, for you, at twilight, and beckons to them as they pass. She tells them that her husband is away and invites them in to seduce them. No one will ever know, she promises. We'll get away with it. Oh, these young men, they'll have to be careful here. We're told that her lips drip honey and her seductive words are smoother than olive oil. But in the end, she is as bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. It's graphic language. Later, we discover that this seductive woman is kind of an embodiment of another woman, Lady Folly. The seductive woman is folly personified. You see, you need to resist the temptation of giving in to this seductive woman. Resist the temptation of folly. Resisting folly or foolishness in any form is like resisting a seductive temptress. It might be hard to do, especially if you're a young heterosexual elite male, but it's worth it in the long run. These women, they keep appearing amongst all of these wisdom sayings that help us in our everyday life, sayings about finances and speech and working hard and treating people well. And so Proverbs makes the link between the small decisions and actions that we make every day and this metaphor of choosing which woman to follow. Giving in to slander or gossip or treating people unfairly is no different than giving in to the seductive neighbour's wife. You always have a choice. You can choose to follow Lady Wisdom or to follow Lady Folly. Every time you make a small life decision, every action that you take on every day of your life is a choice between the path of wisdom and the path of folly. The message of Proverbs is make sure you follow the right woman in all of the little tasks of life, because there are no little things in life. Everything is a big thing. Everything matters. Every decision matters. Every action matters. Everything is a choice between wisdom and folly. Finally, we come to the Proverbs 31 woman, right at the very end of the book. And so we discover that just as Lady Folly is like this seductive woman who will ruin your life if you give in to her, so the Proverbs 31 wife is Lady Wisdom in the flesh. The Proverbs 31 woman is someone to be emulated because she is the embodiment of wisdom, just as Lady Folly was the embodiment of folly, that seductive temptress. The Proverbs 31 woman spends her day carefully tending to the things of her everyday life. She takes care of her family. She makes discerning business transactions. She takes care of the little things. She has a great reputation, and that is wisdom. because all of the numerous small decisions that need to be made every day, the dozens of interactions that we have with people each day, all of those things add up to a whole life. And if we practice using wisdom in each of those small decisions, if we see those dozens of interactions as dozens of opportunities to treat people well, to reach mutually beneficial goals, our lives will be fruitful. And they will go as well as they can possibly go, given our circumstances. Proverbs asks these young leaders in training, just as it asks us, who would you rather have as a life partner? The Proverbs 31 woman who will stay with you forever, baking your bread, making you fine clothes, and working towards a prosperous household? Or the adulterous neighbour's wife who will give you the excitement of a one-night stand and then stab you in the back? Wisdom is the better way to live. Follow Lady Wisdom and stay away from Lady Folly, even when she's at her most seductive. They'll both call to you. You'll come across them both every day in your workplace, in your home, in all of your interactions and decisions. Your life consists of a lifetime of decisions of following wisdom or following folly. My brother Tim died about 11 years ago of cancer. As I was thinking about the Proverbs 31 woman, I realised that my brother was a Proverbs 31 man. He did small things well. He was shrewd in the decisions he made. He took time to engage with people as he came across them in his everyday life. He was kind to his grandchildren. He listened to them as if they were telling him things of the utmost importance. And he had a particular knack for connecting with people from all walks of life and treating them with equal respect and concern. He truly showed no partiality. His was a life well lived. He wasn't perfect. He was a flawed human being like everybody else. But his was a life well lived. Tim and his wife lived on Thursday Island, but after his cancer diagnosis, they had to move to Innisfail to be closer to a hospital. He was having seizures as a result of his brain tumours. There was no hope of recovery. Life was pretty miserable. About a week after they moved, I phoned Tim to see how he was going. He said he couldn't talk long. He was at his neighbour's house. She was teaching him how to make pasta from scratch. He was very animated. She was Italian, you see, the perfect person to teach him how to make pasta. And I'm thinking, you've just moved to a new town where you don't know anyone. Your house is probably a mess, full of unpacked boxes. You could have a seizure at any moment. You're dying with no hope of recovery. But you've met the neighbour and you're learning to make pasta. I gave Tim's eulogy. And as I reflected on his life, I realised that he'd left me a legacy to follow. This ability of his to connect with people from all walks of life, to be interested in people, it was something that could be learnt, something that could be practiced. And so I decided I would practice it. One day, not long after Tim's funeral, I was going through a supermarket checkout. Those checkout staff, they're on their feet all day. Their work is often tedious. They have to put up with customers who are rude and obnoxious. But they're people. Tim would have treated them like human beings. I decided that I would honour my brother's life by making a particular effort to treat checkout staff well. And I've done that for 11 years now. Maybe not perfectly, but I've done it for so long that it's actually become a habit. I always make eye contact. I try to connect in some small way in the brief time of interaction that we have. I refuse to be in a hurry, even when I'm in a hurry. If the customer before me is rude to the checkout staff, I share an eye roll behind that customer's back. I think that in these small everyday interactions, I'm acting wisely. I'm following brother wisdom and conducting my time in the checkout line in the best way possible and to the best possible effect. And you know, it's not a chore. It's not something that I'm doing because I should. I'm not trying really hard to be virtuous, but I found that life is better when I share an eye roll and a grin with Joe at Capera Woolies, who used to be a trucker before he started working checkouts. Life is richer because one day I complimented Joe on his glittery nail polish, and I found out that he started painting his nails because he used to have a nail biting habit. And to think that I might have missed the opportunity to connect with Joe because I was scrolling on my phone when I went through his checkout. That would have been foolish indeed. Lady wisdom, brother wisdom is everywhere. So live with your eyes wide open. Take the time to reflect on life and what's important. Choose what is wise over what is seductive. Look out for Lady Wisdom everywhere you go and follow her down the path to life. See you next week.